Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Planning and Development Board. As usual, I need to say that we are not expecting to have a fire alarm. So if the alarm does sound, it's probably going to be a real life emergency. If the alarm does sound, please leave the building by the nearest safest exit, which is likely to be that door, or if not, the Civic Suite entrance that you all entered by tonight. Please leave the building as quickly and safely as you can. Go to assembly point G in the car park, which is just outside those windows, and stay there until tonight's proper officer, which is Mr. Tobin, says it is safe to do otherwise. Please just don't go home, because the fire brigade has the register of who's here, and we don't want them running around a potentially burning building looking for people sitting at home having a cup of tea and a bag of chips. Apologies for absence, Mr. Tobin.
Apologies from Councillor Tony Clues and substitutes in his place is Councillor Denise Clues. Apologies for Councillor Hayfield. However, I see that Councillor Hayfield is here. It's interesting because we're on the sheet here, and I'm wondering if they've been entered on the wrong line here, because Councillor Hancock isn't here, and I'm wondering if that's
indeed Councillor Hancock.
I think it's been entered on the wrong line, so I apologise, because I was very confused when I saw that, and I just saw you. So,
I haven't got a nameplate change. You have to guess who I am.
You've risen from the grave, haven't you?
They also have apologies to Councillor Moss, who is still unwell, and they received apologies from Councillor Rose, who's been at work.
Also, Councillor Mawson, he's poor, he's got a cold, so.
So, members, are you happy to note those apologies?
Yeah.
And I, in my normal way, I would say to Councillor Mrs. Clues and Councillor Mrs. Humphries, welcome to the planning board. I hope you enjoy it, but you're here as often as most of the rest of us are, so you know the votes already. So, welcome back. Members, do you have any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests?
I had to declare the same one that I declared last time for the Poleswood block, which was that I'd been involved in the consultation, but somebody was listening. And, yeah,
Thank you.
okay.
Members, I'd be surprised if you've noticed, but there's an election in a little while. You may well have passed your notice, but this is technically, I think, the last meeting of this board. Some of you may not be standing for election. Some of you may stand and not be re-elected. But I'd just like, before we go on, to say thank you very much indeed for your diligence and generosity of time and your commitment. It's been a pleasure to work with you. And genuinely, I'd like to see you all back in a month or two's time. But if not, you know, it cannot be any comment upon your tenacity and public spiritedness by the way you turned up month after month to argue about planning applications. And broadly, I have to say, the number of times our determinations have been unanimous is a testament to this authority, its officers and its members. So thank you very much indeed for all your dedication.
I just say, Chair, I think we should thank you for your guidance and direction over the time. I think you've contributed considerably.
We should, but are we going to?
Oh, thank you very much.
Maybe not to a vote.
Your own side is rather mean, I think.
Especially the one with the black shirt with no name. So, members, the next item is the minutes of the board held on the 6th of March. Are you all happy that I can sign them as an accurate reflection?
So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 5 is the confirmation of the immediate effect of the Article 4 direction we discussed on at least 2 previous occasions for the conservation area in Waterwarden. Mr. Brown, anything to add to the report?
No, Mr. Chairman, this just follows on from previous reports, as you say, and it's confirmation of that the Article 4 takes an immediate effect.
Thank you very much. Members, any comments?
Chair, just to update colleagues that the old school, which is part of the conservation area, was attacked and damaged on Sunday by some guys that climbed 30 foot into the air and threw the slates and the ridge tiles off. So anything we can do to progress this matter, I'll be really pleased.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, Madam. The next item is the government consultation on permitted development rights. Mr. Brown, anything to add?
Nothing to add, Mr. Chairman. As members are aware, from time to time the government does recommend changes to permitted development, and that is there's a greater degree of development that can go ahead without the need for a planning application. These are the latest proposals, and they cover 4 areas. We've outlined what we think about them. It may be, Mr. Chairman, if the board wants to go through them one by one, and then we can record the outcome.
Thank you very much. So, members, the first one is a proposed change in respect to campsites, where the government wants to, or rather is suggesting that the right to have a temporary campsite be increased to 60 days per year. Our officer's recommendation is that we respond saying 14 days. Any comments?
I can't see any reason why we wouldn't want to limit this to the same as other uses. It's sensible to keep it in line with all the other extensions to use.
I agree.
Different uses, sorry.
Yeah, generally, Councillor Davis, I agree with you. 60 days per year, they don't have to be consecutive days, from what I understand. So effectively, that could be every weekend in the summer.
Yeah.
Which, you know, if it's at the bottom of your garden, I'm sure would be a distraction. Okay, so broadly okay with the officer's draft recommendation?
Yeah.
The next one is on solar equipment, essentially item 3.6, where we're talking about additional 3.6 and 3.7, where there's additional latitude for including solar equipment. All okay with that?
Yeah, I'd just like to reinforce that as well. If we can make any stronger our response to that, because we are continually seeing the nibbling away of the protection in conservation areas and things that are allowed to be done. And I think that this is a really big retrograde step in preserving the look of our conservation areas. I think it is really important that we make very strong representation that this doesn't continue.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think conservation areas, listed buildings are protected for a purpose.
Yeah.
Councillor Humphrey?
Chair, I wonder if I can ask the officers. It talks about domestic property here, and I'm just sort of looking at just up the road from where I live, the Iron Properties. It's outside our area, but only by a few yards. 3 3/4 million square feet of industrial buildings, not a solar panel inside. And I just wonder is there anything out there for the future of occupying huge, great flat areas, which are going to be industrial properties?
So, Mr. Brown, is there an opportunity here for us to say that the government should move more towards encouraging, so not simply making it possible, but to positive encouragement for areas to have solar panels on new industrial buildings?
Well, there's 2 things to that, Mr. Chairman. First of all, it's a permitted development right anyway on commercial buildings, so it's a choice that the developer has as to whether they put them on there or not. However, if I update that to say that under the new building regulations that are coming in, buildings will now have to have solar panels on them as part of the building regulation regime, not necessarily as the planning regime, but the government is looking at it via a different direction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could comment on that, I mean 3.7 makes it clear that a lot more stuff can be put on commercial properties in areas of beauty, in national parks and so on. And I'm not sure that that is always an appropriate way to go with those things. So we have to be a little bit careful. Are there? I can think of many buildings in North Warwickshire where they really should already be fitted.
Are you thinking about this building, Councillor Burlix?
Unfortunately, I know what the situation with the structure of this building is, and that it wouldn't be appropriate in this case. But there are buildings that have been put up in the borough in very recent times that could have had that fitted when they were built. It's a really big lost opportunity in some of those.
The next item, paragraph 3.8, is the rollout of solar equipment on non-domestic car parks. Do you want to explain how this would work, Mr. Brown?
It's essentially focused on supermarket car parks and also the large car parks on industrial estates and commercial distribution parks, rather than having car parking aisles with cars backing onto each other. In the middle of the aisles, there'd effectively be a canopy, which is a pillar with an umbrella of solar panels over the cars, actually shading them, but it would also generate the electricity. So there'll be long rows of canopies certainly within the larger car parking areas.
And the thought being that that might reduce the pressure for greenfield sites to be used as solar panels.
That's what's being suggested, yeah.
I say that I have seen photographs of this done in some large hospital car parks and other places. And it's, depending on where the site is, it is a possible solution.
Any comments? Anything else, Councillor Clews?
Thank you, Chair. I quite like the idea of that. You know, I'm not a fan of solar panels. And if that can stop them keep coming into our green space, I think it would be a good idea. Because I'm always get very worried about any of these that's in the flight path of any blackbirds. I know somebody that's not too far away from us that had them on their house, and they ended up with a swan on the roof because it's right next to the canal where the swan is on. So it's also always a concern of mine.
At item 2.9, Mr. Brown, you say the cases would need to involve prior approval. Is that part of the proposed legislation, so that planning boards such as ours could look at the detail, or is that a recommendation from you that's
No, that's in the consultation paper, Mr. Chairman. Effectively, the permitted development right will be an outline approval, subject to the council having a say on the actual detail, which is common practice now for a lot of prior approval applications that go through the system. So they're just replicating that system, but for solar panels.
Okay. Well, members, that gives you the opportunity to be sure that the detail is appropriate. Then the agenda item C at 3.10 for local authorities to have greater largesse to deal with things such as EV works, which I think is reasonable. Councillor Riley?
Chairman, my apologies to Mr. Brown. I should have thought of this when we were talking about it on Friday. I think there's some concerns here around high streets, particularly if we're going to allow the implementation of EV charging points across our high streets, which obviously will restrict car parking both on the high street, but also if it involves the removal of street furniture such as litter bins, etc. Perhaps we need to consider more about how we make sure, as well as the benefits of the EV charging points go forward, that actually we don't change the nature or the accessibility of the high street locations by covering them in EV charging points.
I think that's a fair point. I mean, certainly I'm aware of the EV charging points at Churchill and Coleshill, and those two parking spaces are often vacant because people don't park there because they think it's stopping people driving their cars.
Totally. So I mean, I think particularly with things like bins, where it seems such a minor nature, but actually to high footfall areas, the bins are incredibly important. So we perhaps need to have some protection for the waste collection authorities and people that own the bins, Because obviously this, I presume this power is orientated towards the Highways Authority.
Brown?
Not necessarily, Mr. Chairman. Our own car parks, for instance, is where it's going to apply. I think because it's a local authority right, and it's up to the local authority to determine where they are and balance the issues which Councillor Riley's been talking about. For instance, our director of Streetscape here would come up with a proposal, presumably he or she would consult with us, and so that we get that balance right between the provision and not affecting footfall. And then that will be a permitted development, but I think that consultation could take place.
Thank you.
Can I just say that actually in 310, I think it's third line down, it does say the proposal is to enable bodies working on behalf of the council. So it's not somebody else that can come along and have that permitted right. It's in our gift to give that if we want it to be done.
Yes, but it's interesting, Councillor Simpson raises Jeff Hill because there was objection to that points for a whole number of valid reasons, and yet the Highways Authority put their head down and ignored everybody, including the residents.
But that would have been the county council,
Say no, I mean,
not the highways agency.
no, I said the Highways Authority.
I apologise then.
And the final point is on filmmaking, which I don't think necessarily affects this bill, but I am aware that there was a film or programme made in Maxstoke that took at the Village Hall for about 2 months. So we do have filmmaking take place in the room. So are you happy then with the recommendation as printed, plus additional comments that you've all made being rolled into that as our response to government?
Yes. Agreed.
Yeah. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Agenda item number 7 is the government consultation on planning fees. So essentially, in a move towards getting local authorities to be cost neutral, the government are proposing an increase in planning fees of 25% for most applications, but 35% for major applications. That would lead to an increase in the fee here for applications such as extensions and outbuildings from £206 to £258, for single houses from £462 to £578, and the maximum fee permissible for major residential or commercial applications would increase from £300,000 to £405,000. I think that would make a net difference to us, based on last year's accounts, of around £150,000. So the government are consulting us as to what we think about that. Members, any comments you'd like to relay to His Majesty's government?
Sorry, this is getting a bit of a habit of putting hands up first. I'm happy that there are recommending that the planning fees are going to be up, and that the government's contribution is going to go up to that, but it still doesn't close the gap. Somewhere in there, and I can't remember which paragraph it is, it actually says that we seek to try and take the burden of planning costs away from the residents up here and to put it elsewhere. And this doesn't actually achieve this. It does go towards easing the situation, but it doesn't actually close the gap. And I would have liked to have seen that gap closed a lot more than this. Does that make sense?
No, I know where you're going. I think it is reasonable to make planning less dependent on the public purse. But at the same time, I think everyone benefits by effective planning. And to an extent, there's an argument that should the applicant, particularly the individual householder, pay for the full cost of planning when everybody benefits by effective planning. So, I can see both sides.
I agree with that, but I think that central government should be making up that gap. And it's not meant as a political point. I just think that what the contribution of the rest of the residents and the people that are seeking planning permission shouldn't have to bear the whole cost. as it is something that everybody benefits from,
Yeah.
then we should have a collective responsibility of it without putting it through strained finances.
I absolutely hear what you're saying, Councillor Dervick. The only experience I've got is government promises money, they never actually pay us the full amount, they never pay us what they said they're going to pay us, and they never pay us on time.
But if we don't comment on it, they'll never know.
So look, I'm happy to include that in the recommendation response. And any other comments, members? Councillor Parsons?
3-4, Chair. The fee for a retrospective application would be double the normal fee, but household developments would not be included. I mean, perhaps I've got a bit of a thing about retrospective applications, but it seems to me that we should be aiming to sort of discourage retrospective applications and get applications in when they should be. Effectively, it benefits everybody if we do that. So I'm not sure that the household developments should have that removed, as it were.
Again, I agree with you. I would say again, I think the only effective way to deal with that is to make development without the benefit of planning consent a criminal offence. At the minute, it's a bit of a tiger with no teeth. But I think there is misery created for a lot of our residents by people bending the rules, and there is no effective deterrent at the minute. Double the fee is a step in the right direction, but actually criminality is a better step.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But what's in here doesn't actually include a lot of the retrospective applications that we get, because it's only for commercial development, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can certainly include that in the response as well. Any other comments, members? Councillor
I think I totally agree with that. As soon as I see the word retrospective, it's there on the back of your neck stands up that somebody knows that they've done it wrong, and there's got to be an effective penalty for doing it. Looking at doubling it is a penalty for doing it, because at the end of the day, they've done something willingly that they know they should be going for planning applications, and they've decided to risk it, and as I say, put other people in jeopardy, i.e. neighbours and whatever. So I totally agree with you that there needs to be something stronger to when that word retrospective comes up.
Councillor Gosling?
Just to echo what's been said, I think there is beginning to be a culture of it's better to apologise than ask permission.
Yeah.
And I think it's unfair on the people who do ask permission and abide by the findings of that. And I think that there's so much flexibility if you haven't asked permission that it is disadvantaging the people that are trying to do it right. And I think that this is a small way to equalising the playing field for those people that make the better choices.
Councillor Good?
Thank you, Chair. I think the word I like is recommendation B, that further discussions are held as to the matter of ring fencing these increases. It would be nice if we could ring fence it for such things as enforcement and that kind of thing.
And what I was going to suggest, Councillor Cruz, is that we change B slightly to say, rather than that, we recommend to full council that the additional income is ring fenced for planning. And then council can have a conversation of whether they agree or disagree, but I think it's helpful for us to make a positive comment that we think that money should be ring fenced within the planning budget.
Because I don't think there's many wards out there and not got something that needs enforcement.
So members, are you all happy with the recommendation as printed with those, with the change that we do aim for ring fencing and including the comments that everyone has made?
So
Yeah.
Yeah, all those in favour?
And the same with C.
And the same with C.
Yeah, happy with those measures being imposed.
Yes. Mr. Brown, do you have a detailed note of all the things you're going to put in there?
I shall look to the clerks, Mr. Chairman, to take a point out. I have made a short note.
Thank you very much, everyone. Agenda item number 8 is the scheme of delegation. So you might remember that certainly a couple of meetings ago, at least, we went through the revised scheme of delegation on enforcement. This is a further recommendation to make sure that we have technically got the wording right. There is no change, if you will, to what we were talking about. It's actually making sure that we record the decision properly and that it fits into the constitution. Anything to add, Mr. Tobin?
No, Chair, if obviously members may have questions or comments on it, but what we've tried to do is, as the previous resolution suggested, get it to mirror as closely as possible the process for applications, so that members have, or local members have involvement, aware of matters that are being enforcement action, and then if there is a reason to bring it to board instead for a decision, they can do that. And if not, then officers can continue and take the action without any unnecessary delay. So hopefully we've captured that by, as I say, the application process. And so therefore, you think that fits with the recommendation and resolution.
Thank you. So members, I'll propose that recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hayfield. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Members, we move on to the planning applications now. The first one is number 30 for 105 Mill Crescent, Kingsbury. As it's our final meeting, there's an extra special treat for you in that former councillor Mrs. Moss has come to talk to you. Mrs. Moss, if you'll welcome back to the council house, but if you'll take the speaker's chair while Mr. Brown introduces his report. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just run through the slides on the screen for you, but they replicate the planning that are in the sort of the papers. Sorry, the plans that are in the papers you have in front of you. The property we have is on the corner, Mill Crescent and Coventry Road in Kingsbury, as you can see on the larger plan here. It's a detached house here, matching the houses up and down that road. The shops which are referred to in the report are on the other side of the road here, 76 to 78, and the lay-by, which is referred to in the report, again is shown here on the plan. The plan there shows in yellow the extensions to the proposed extensions to the property. And then here we see the proposed extensions at the bottom, and you can see it's effectively a tripling of the size of the existing site. The size at the moment is this central part where the gable is. The committee report also refers to a planning permission for a single house, which was granted a little while ago next door to the application site. This is the application property here. And as you can see, there's a house which has been approved next door to it, with the parking in between. And as the report indicates, if this particular planning application for the extensions is approved, then this particular house cannot be physically built. So it's an alternative to the actual proposals that have already got a planning permission. The report, Mr. Chairman, runs through the factors that we've received. And you can see it's basically because of the representations that we received, we sought clarification on a number of issues, and those are outlined in the report. And I've commented on those in the observations section, asking members to do the application on the merits of the proposal that's in front of it, and not one that it might actually turn out to be. That's the standard rule, which I do repeat to you. As far as we're concerned, the design is in keeping, even though it is large. There are no adverse residential amenity impacts, and the parking standards are fully met. So it's recommended for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Welcome back. Mr. Tobin will explain the rules for public speaking to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Tobin.
Good evening. You may well be familiar with this former councillor, but in a moment you'll be given 3 minutes to address the board. So what I'll do is I'll tell you when your 3 minutes begins. I'll tell you when you have 1 minute remaining, and then if you're still speaking at the end of 3 minutes, I'll tell you when the time's up.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good evening, everybody.
Time starts now.
Nice to see familiar faces again. Right, I'm here to express the concerns of Mill Crescent residents, together with those of my fellow parish councillors. All are of the opinion that this is obviously not an application for an extension designed for family use, although the applicant maintains it is. Well, maybe initially. The internal design suggests that it is designed either as a multi-occupancy house
or for commercial use. The area inside the front entrance was initially described as the reception area, which immediately begs the question, why would a family residence necessitate a reception area? Furthermore, all bedrooms have been designed with dressing rooms, and 3 out of the 4 bedrooms have ensuite facilities, and the 4th has exclusive use of the family bathroom. Even if intended for family use, the internal design suggests that it would possibly be occupied by older or grown-up children, as partners maybe, who have or will have vehicles of their own, resulting in any number of vehicles from 4 to 8 necessitating parking provision. Only 2 are marked on the plans, which begs the question, where will the rest park? On-street parking at this point is already causing serious congestion generated by the popular village shop located across the road. The lay-by outside the shop, more often than not, is inadequate to cater for the volume of vehicles marked by people visiting the shop, resulting frequently in congested on-street parking. Further traffic congestion is created by visitors who use the nearby entrance to the water park. This proposed development is right next to the junction of Mill Crescent and the very busy A51 through the village, and any additional on-street parking, together with an increase in the number of vehicles entering and exiting this property at this point, would cause further serious traffic congestion and safety issues. Buses, refuse, recycling and emergency vehicles often fail to get through due to on-street parking. Commercial vehicles during the building period will have no option except to park on street, which is dangerously close to the junction of Mill Crescent and the A51 without causing serious obstruction. This location is not the right location for a substantial development such as the proposed one, which parish councillors and residents agree is totally out of character with the surrounding properties. I conclude by requesting that, if approved, that a restriction is issued prohibiting the parking of any commercial vehicles in the lay-by outside the shop, and that further parking provision is incorporated within the design. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for Mrs. Moss? Councillor Bell?
Brilliant. So as the officer said, there is permission for another house on this plot.
Yes.
It obviously won't be built if the suspension goes ahead. So do you still think there'll be more problems with vehicles and parking through having this extension than having 2 residences on that plot?
I think having both planning applications where there's an implication there, with serious parking facilities. The application for the dwelling, I believe, was a 3-bedroom house, wasn't it? So there may be fewer vehicles, parking spaces required for the house than this application. Because this one being a 4-bedroom house suggests that they are large bedrooms, which means they could be double bedrooms, which would necessitate. I think that this application could generate anything from 4 to 8 vehicles, whereas with a house, possibly the maximum number would be 6.
Plus this one. As it is.
Anyway,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is it permitted to make an observation about that at this stage?
If it requires a response from Mrs. Moss, yes. If not, it's better if we wait till the debate.
I'll ask you a question then. On the proposal, there appears to be 2 parking spaces.
Yes.
On the existing planning permission, there appear to be 4 parking spaces for a similar number of bedrooms.
Sorry,
On the existing planning permission, where there will be 2 houses,
yes.
there are 4 bedrooms, I think, and there are 4 parking spaces. With the proposal that is before us today, I believe that there are only 2 parking spaces. Do you think that that is something that is supportable, or should we be looking for extra parking spaces to be allocated for this house?
However many vehicles either application have, parking is going to be an issue. And it's both the location that they're, it's right on the junction of May Crescent and the very busy A51, through the village, and any on-street parking that would be required will cause congestion at the best of times.
Just one question from me, Mr. Moss. At the end of your comments, you were talking about a request for conditions. I didn't quite hear what that was. Could you tell us that again?
Yes, that if the application is granted, that a request that any commercial vehicles are prohibited from parking in the lay-by outside the shop.
Okay.
Because of that lay-by at the best of times isn't adequate to cope with the volume of traffic parked for people visiting the shop. So commercial vehicles, if commercial vehicles parked in the lay-by, it's going to push all the parking onto the crescent, which will only exacerbate an already existing parking issue.
Thank you. I've got that now. Councillor Parsons?
I'm just going to ask, do delivery vehicles park in that lay-by at all, or is there a separate area?
No delivery vehicles do park there as well.
So it might be a bit difficult to have commercial vehicles if there are commercial vehicles actually stopping for the shop.
When I say commercial vehicles, I mean commercial vehicles delivering building materials to the building site.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any questions for our speaker? Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Members, before we open up the conversation, Mr. Brown, I just have one question of a technical nature. I accept your comments in the report that it wouldn't be possible to put the consented second house on the site. But historically, I remember when it was stuff like this, we used to try and seek an agreement to, I can't remember the right word, revoke, yes. Do we need to think through that, or because technically there would be 2 consents, however difficult it may be to implement?
There would be 2 consents, Mr. Chairman, but physically, if the extensions under this application are approved, it is physically impossible to build out the house. So therefore, they are, in effect, the current landowner has to choose between either the permission already granted, or if permission is granted tonight for this permission.
Okay, and I'm leaning heavily on what my friend Councillor Dervick said. I accept that this application will meet our car parking standards, but actually a bigger house will lead to 2 parking spaces, 2 houses would lead to 4 spaces. Is there any opportunity for us to go back to the applicant and say, will you provide greater than the car parking space required by our policy?
That's his choice, Mr. Chairman. The applicant at the present time is just doing the two spaces, basically because they do meet council standards.
Okay. Councillor.
Chair, I was just wondering, I thought when it comes to extension, that 30% was a limit at one stage, and maybe slightly bigger after discussion. Am I wrong? Because isn't this like doubling the size of the property?
It's like the Pirates Code, Councillor Humphreys, it's guidance.
And also, Mr. Chairman, that particular guidance is particularly relevant in Greenbelt, where you're talking about openness. This is not Greenbelt, therefore we would normally allow larger if there are no adverse impacts being caused.
Can I just ask some supplement to that? Does that mean it's infinitum if it's not in the green belt?
Well, it comes down to your vote then, Councillor Humphreys.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair, I support the recommendation as written. while I accept the concerns that it is a large house, the other houses that sit at the front of the Coventry Road in terms of its size or its proposed use, and their officer's report makes it clear they have no objections, and the site sits within the permitted development zone to the village.
Any other comments, questions? The tractor proposer, is there a seconder? Thank you. Could I ask that you add a couple of bits into that? The first one is that we ask the applicant to consider providing additional parking space beyond what our policy requires, and that we ask the applicant to enter into a form of considerate contractor scheme to try and accommodate the request from Mrs. Moss and the Parish Council about commercial vehicles. It's down to the applicant to say yes or no, but I think it's reasonable to ask.
Yeah, perfectly happy to do that. I mean, knowing the location, it is a dangerous location if they obstruct the delivery of goods to the shop by parking in the lay-by.
Thank you. Are you happy with that?
Indeed, I think if the construction vehicles park in the lay-by, the delivery vehicles are going to park on the road and the like, so yes.
Thank you. Any other comments, members, or are you happy to go to a vote?
Yeah, I don't think I can support the recommendation. I just think the building's out of proportion to everything else along that road. Thank you.
Thank you. So, members, it's been proposed and seconded for proposed consent to be granted. Can I see those in favour? That's 9, I think. And those against? 3. So members, and 1 abstention. Well, actually 2. So that's granted with those additional comments. So we now move to application number 46 for Deffens Wood, St Michael's Close, New Arley. Mr. Brown, anything to add to the report?
Let me just show you the plan first, Mr. Chairman. This is the plan that was submitted. As the report indicates, Mr. Chairman, local members have now walked the site together with the Warwickshire Forestry Officer. And as a consequence of that, some changes have been agreed with the Forestry Officer in that I think one tree is to be retained rather than felled, and I think another one is to be similar operation to take place. From my point of view, Mr. Chairman, provided we get an amended plan in that shows that, then we'll ensure that any notice that goes out reflects that change.
Thank you very much.
Could I just ask through you, Chair, Mr. Brown, which tree is down to be saved?
You're asking a question, Mrs. I think it's 2HR4.
I think.
Yeah, it's just I've got concerns because they was taking 8 down and replacing none, I believe. I would feel more comfortable with this if they at least replaced the two of the 3 that concerns me, which is the hazel and the hawthorn, which are both what our wildlife eat. So to me, they was taking 3 of the hazel away and only leaving 1. And I was taking the hawthorn away. So unless any trees are being replaced or they're leaving another hazel or the hawthorn, I'm sorry, Chair, I can't support this.
Councillor Wilson?
This is an incredibly important space for me. This is where I go on my weekends with my kids. It's one of my little havens. The hazel is being coppiced, so will regrow. And as it is at the moment, because it's over mature, it's quite dangerous and looks as if it will not only fall and potentially damage other things, but it will damage the tree as well because of the way it's so the hazel is being coppiced down to the ground, and it's a hazel management technique. It's one of the things that used to be used, and one of the problems with Deffens Wood is that the old coppice stalls haven't been managed, which has made them unstable. Excuse me. So this is an attempt to remanage the old hazel coppice wood. The hawthorn is damaged. I have asked about plans to replant and reintroduce wood, and that is part of their management plan, but there isn't any in there at the moment, partly because it's a restricted species area, because it's made up of the old Arden wildwood. So the idea being that it's better to actually have self-seeded and to support the self-seeded, because that's come from the original trees, than it is to bring in trees from outside. So I have asked these questions, and it's taken me a long time to be happy to support this, but I think I'm there. So the idea is that they manage the wood while it regenerates itself, rather than actually introducing other species or other trees from elsewhere. So to make sure they're native. The one that they have said that they will leave is 2HR4, which has a fungal infection at the top, about 6 meters up. But they have said that actually they can turn it into a biodiversity kind of, so they'll leave the height, but take off any boughs that are likely to fall and damage properties and people underneath. So they will make it safe, but leave it as it is, because then it can be used by the woodpeckers and used by other things. Which is, it's our woodpecker tree, so we were a bit upset.
Yeah, we've got one in the cemetery.
Yeah, but you can't see, so I've been and literally inspected every single tree. And then the other one was it's been changed on here actually. So there was a tree which was going to be cut down, but they said they'll leave it 6 foot up anyway, because that then provides more of a habitat for all the surrounding wildlife. So I've had 2 site visits. I have inspected every single tree to be content, but I do think, and thank you to the officers for their time and patience with me. But I do think that, yeah.
With that explanation from Councillor Gosling, I feel a lot more secure on this. It's just that, could we just put in there somewhere where it doesn't get to this state again, so it's maintained a bit better than being left over the years. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I would say, members, I think that the County Council on this occasion have got it right. They consulted the authority, provided the opportunity for local members to go and to be engaged, and actually have come out with a far better proposal, I think, at the end of it, than we would have had. There have been other applications in the borough by the same applicant where actually there was little or no public consultation. Would have ended up where the first-time residents would have heard about it when the chainsaws started working. So I think this is good, and I'm like you, delighted to hear that fell doesn't necessarily mean fell, it means coppicing and actually management. My only concern is for people like my colleague in Black Bear with the description of over mature, meaning not surviving.
Leading in the wrong direction.
Many mighty oaks at the end of the day.
Can I cut to the chase, Chair, with the recommendation?
No, thanks, mate. I would prefer you to move a recommendation that, subject to the receipt of amended plans, the matter is delegated for approval to our planning officer in consultation with local members, if you don't mind.
I did have my hand up, but it was basically to congratulate the officers and local members in actually getting much better solution to this problem. As you say, coppicing doesn't mean removal. It's been there for thousands of years. There is evidence of coppice hazel, and it's actually using the other trees there in whatever way would encourage biodiversity, and would be the sort of thing that would happen if we didn't touch it at all and didn't let people in there.
No, absolutely, it's more organic. Councillor,
If what you just said was an alternative proposal, I'll second it.
thank you very much.
Just to move us along,
He's getting old, Members, are you all content with that? That essentially, subject to receipt of amended plans along the lines described by Councillor Gosling, that it's then delegated to the planning officer in consultation with local members to make the final determination.
Excellent.
You all happy? Those in favour? Thank you very much. Next application is number 544, land 550 metres east of Vaults Farm, Astley Lane. We have a speaker on Teams, Mr. Ben Parkins. Ms. Parkins, if you could stand by while Mr. Brown introduces the report. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just run through the slides first? Again, these are replicas of what you have in front of you in paper form. And also I refer to the site visit as I go through this. Members went to the site on Saturday morning. There's a note of that site visit circulated to all members in front of them on their desks tonight. The site is outlined in red. Astley Crossroads is just off the top of the map here, top left. And this is the Astley Lane, which goes down to Bedworth, as you can see down here. The stream which comes down through here is in the bottom of the valley. The Coventry Way footpath parallels that and also follows the valley, as you can see there. So therefore, the site is actually in a sloping site, sloping down from the road down to the watercourse and then back up on the other side. In terms of the site visit, then we had a good look at the site from the back of these particular properties, and then we went round to the access here so that we could look across the site from here. Whilst we were doing those two vantage points, we looked at Bowles Farm and Taff's Farm, which are on the other side of the valley, and we could see the back of the properties here. The Book Farm, which members may know of, is this particular property here. So that's the site location plan. In terms of its layout, then again, members are familiar with the layouts of the applications that we've had in. You can see here the arrays which are facing south, spread throughout the three fields on this side, and part of the a fourth field on the other side of the valley with the watercourse going down here. Then the access arrangements, as you can see, as members saw on the site, that access would be improved in order to put the construction vehicles to come in whilst they were preparing the site, and then it would be retained to the operational period. So I'll go back to the location plan. I'm not going to go through the report, Mr. Chairman, because it explains the reasoning and sequence of the argument as I put in front of you. Basically, this is inappropriate development in the green belt, and therefore there have to be considerations which amount to very special circumstances in order to support the scheme. The report goes through the potential harms, indicating what the actual green belt harm is rather than the definitional harm. I'm suggesting that the green belt harm is limited because it's very local. The landscape and visual harm will follow on from that because of the topography of the site. There's some length going into the heritage impacts because of the presence of Astley Castle and the village of Astley to the north, as well as the Arbury Estate and Arbury Park again to the north, to the northeast of the particular property. In terms of ecology, then there is the 10% biodiversity gain through the landscaping and other treatments that the proposals are being put forward. There's no highway objection. In terms of agricultural land, then the best value agricultural land is 15% of this particular site, and that's grade 3A with no grade 2. I'll run through some other matters there as well towards the end of the report. We've looked at cumulative impacts. Even though this particular application should be dealt with on its own, we have to look at cumulative impacts, given that we have two other sites where planning permission has been granted in this general area of the borough. Then section E onwards, Mr. Chairman, of circumstances which the applicant is putting forward, which he considers cumulatively amount to circumstances which outweigh the cumulative level of harms. The final planning balance then has to be looked at, and as you can see there, my view is that the circumstances, the considerations do clearly outweigh the level of harm in this particular case. Over the weekend, Mr. Chairman, we've received a further letter of further representation from a local resident. Now, the local resident still maintains the objection in the sense that the objection in principle, in other words, a green belt objection, but the resident has put forward a couple of suggestions in order to perhaps limit any impacts. The first of those is to do with noise. As you can see from the report, Mr. Chairman, the recommendation is that effectively we're waiting to hear from the Environmental Health Officer and the applicant on agreed conditions. Those conditions are likely to be agreed because they have been follow the same sort of suit as we have on the other sites. and so I'm expecting those to come in. The resident is suggesting that they may not be necessary if the plant and equipment is relocated away from the houses. At the moment, if I can just go on to the, you can see up at the top here, there's a couple of areas of plant here, which is quite close to the residences, which are down here. This is these particular blocks here. The resident is suggesting that this is moved down here, where the construction compound would be, therefore, in fact, completely removing it from any the scope of the houses. And the second suggestion is for.
Sorry, Mr. Brown, can you show me again where the proposed alternative site is?
It's down here, or the green area, where the compound would be.
And going to where?
Sorry, that's the area that's being proposed so rather than just being a construction compound for the preparation of the solar panels, the actual equipment here would be down here as well, rather than located here at the back of the properties.
Thank you.
And the second suggestion is basically strengthening the landscaping around all the boundaries of the site. In other words, having a corridor of trees along here, down this site, and down this boundary as well. So therefore the northern, eastern and western boundaries, that's the suggestion that's being put forward. That letter and those suggestions have been put to the applicant, Mr. Chairman, and no doubt the speaker may well refer to those particular issues when you invite him to speak. As far as I'm concerned, Mr. Chairman, I've got nothing further to add.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. So, Mr. Parkins, welcome to the planning board. Mr. Hogan will now explain the rules on public engagement.
So, good evening, Mr. Parkin. Just to explain to you the process, in a moment or two, you'll be given 3 minutes in which to address the board. So I'll let you know when your 3 minutes begins, then I'll let you know when you have 1 minute remaining, and then if you're still speaking at the end of 3 minutes, I'll let you know that your time's up. Yeah. Just checking over to here as well.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay. All right, your time starts now.
Excellent. Good evening all, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to address the planning committee this evening. My name is Ben Parkins. I am a planning consultant representing the applicant, Industrial Solar Bedworth Limited. By way of a quick summary, Bedworth Solar Farm would generate 60 megawatts of electricity every year over a period of 40 years. This would be the equivalent to powering 5,225 homes annually, while offsetting over 3,000 tons of CO2 emissions per year. The proposals will clearly make a valuable contribution in the fight against climate change. The proposals also include planting nearly 2.5 kilometres of new hedgerows, many new trees, extensive wildflower meadows, and the addition of a wildlife pond. All of these measures will be of great benefit to local wildlife. The project has gone through various design iterations, even since before being submitted, such as positioning the arrays so as to avoid good quality agricultural land as much as possible. Likewise, since the application was submitted, extensive talks took place with National Grid to remove the requirement for a 20-metre high mast. The mast is therefore no longer being proposed. A 10-metre wide band of trees has also been added facing Voles Farm to the southwest, again helping to minimise the visual appearance of the solar farm. We have also been made aware of the recently submitted comments requesting a wide woodland belt to the northwest, northeast and southeast of the site. However, this will be technically problematic as it would require removing panels as well as resulting in a lot of shading on the panels, both of which would compromise the performance of the scheme. The wide woodland belt would also result in a permanent loss of agricultural land. However, taking these comments on board, our suggestion is to instead upgrade the proposed hedgerows to the northwest and northeast of the site with a single belt of trees along the hedgerows. This would help provide screening without compromising the required output of the solar farm. Another comment revolved around noise and asked whether the substation could be relocated to an area where there's currently panels proposed. Removing these panels would again affect system performance and wouldn't result in any real benefits to surrounding residential properties. The submitted noise assessment assumes a worst-case scenario model and even then concludes that there will not be an unacceptable impact on local amenity. Again, taking the submitted comments on board, our suggestion is that once constructed, a validation noise survey would be undertaken, and should any issues be apparent, then it would be easy enough to add an acoustic barrier behind the substation. A concern was also raised about the deer fence, but we would be happy to provide a revised fence detail incorporating gaps for mammals. Overall, all design comments have been considered and amendments proposed insofar as technically possible. I therefore respectfully ask the members move to approve the application, or alternatively be minded to allow the application to be determined under delegated powers, subject to a revised landscaping plan and revised deer fence drawing. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Parkins. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? Councillor Riley.
Thank you very much indeed. I attended the site visit on Saturday, and I suppose I was taken aback by the size and the scale of the application. And when I read the letter of objection today, actually, I think it raises some very good points around noise.
Okay.
Are you in any position to give the panel any advice on what the noise generated by solar farms and their infrastructure is? Having understood that the objection faced on the infrastructure on the site, I was actually thinking this afternoon, having read the objection, that do the panels make a noise when the wind blows through them? Do they rattle? Do they whistle? Because actually one of the issues about this site is its open aspect and the fact that it sits in a valley, so it sits perhaps in a bit of a wind tunnel.
That's a good question. I'm not a noise expert, but that is not an issue that's raised when we prepare planning applications for solar farms. The things that my colleagues look at, my acoustic colleagues look at, is things like the inverters and the substation, and that's how they model the noise that the solar farm emits, which is overall very, very, very little. So it's not something that I've seen before raised as an issue.
Is there any particular way that we could review that by looking at existing structures elsewhere? I mean, clearly it won't be the only solar farm that sits in a windy hole.
I'm sure we could provide some information. I'm happy to go back to my noise colleagues and see if they've got any information available.
Thank you.
Councillor Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, I didn't get to the site visit, and that's there. But it seems to me I took on your suggestion of the single belt of trees by the hedgerows upgrading. That seemed to be a good suggestion to me, and I think that perhaps should be considered there. I'm a little bit at a loss as to why the control aspect of it couldn't be relocated to the proposed construction compound. I appreciate that the noise may be relatively low level, but of course it is going to be constant and it is going to be there all the time. And near to residential properties, if that can be avoided, it has to be a plus. So, I mean, you've mentioned that you will be looking at going back to your noise colleagues, as it were, for want of a better term. And it would seem to me that relocation of the control aspect of this isn't a huge ask, basically. I think it should be looked at.
Yeah, no, that's a fair comment. I don't know if I've misunderstood the letter, because it seemed to me that the substation was the person was suggesting that the substation be moved to where the panels are. So maybe I've misunderstood that. But yes, it would be possible to move the substation. Although, if this could be done, if members would be minded to allow the application to be approved under delegated powers, then we can provide a revised scheme, and I'm sure the applicant will be happy to do that.
I mean, what we've been shown is that the control aspect of it could be moved to where the proposed compound will be for the works, which puts quite some distance away from the properties, which seems to me to be a sensible idea.
Yes, it's yes. I suppose when I speak to my noise colleagues, I know that they will say that there isn't an issue in the first place. But I think in order to appease neighbouring properties, I'm sure my client would be happy to look into that, definitely.
Thank you. Councillor Pooh?
Thank you, Chair. You did mention that you're going to be putting in new hedges and new trees, but I still believe this site's going to be fenced off. I heard you mention something about deer fencing. Could you just highlight on that, and especially how our badgers will still be able to travel?
Yes, no, that's a good question. So deer fencing is just post and wire type fencing, and the drawing that we provided didn't include a mammal gate, but we intend to submit a revised drawing. So then mammals like badgers, they can then move around the site, and that would not be an issue.
Thank you.
Any other questions, man? Councillor Riley?
Just one more, thank you, Chair. When we were on site, there was discussion about mitigation, visual mitigation planting around hedgerows, and I'm sure the fellow said that you were looking at planting that would grow 3 metres high, 9 foot high. I'm interested in what plans you would have to maintain that hedgerow, but also what hedgerow you are thinking about, because I don't know of many hedgerows that are 9 foot high. I know a lot that are obviously down at waist height, and obviously if we're talking about significantly creating new ecosystems, it's important we're clear about what we are trying to create as well as visually screening.
So hawthorn is a typical hedgerow that's used for screening solar farms. It provides a really good habitat for loads of species. And in terms of how that would be maintained, it's possible to, if requested, it's possible to submit like a biodiversity management plan or a landscape and ecological management plan, and that would basically set out the maintenance regime so that the hedgerows are maintained properly, they grow and bush out, and provide the best possible value to ecology, as well as being effective at screening the site.
Thank you.
Yeah, just on, I think, the visual screening, especially the trees in place. Hawthorn's not a very fast growing species, and if it's going to be growing up to 9 feet tall, it's probably going to take it quite a long time. Is there any way we can strengthen the landscaping? It's a very exposed site. It's got overseen by everybody. It's not hidden at all, and especially with the fencing around it. And while obviously we welcome the mammal gates, I think we could do with a clearer picture of actually how many and where and what kind of insight is seen into the site and the usages at the moment. And I just think that the landscaping and the actual impact on nature needs to be more strategically planned.
Yeah. Sorry, is right? Do you want me to get back to you on that, or?
Sorry, I can put it. Yeah, if you could reflect on that, that would be great.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
And sorry to add to the gridding, Mr. Parkins, but I have 3 questions, which hopefully are fairly quick. In the previous report, we had the statement of community involvement, where you'd gone sent letters to 540 properties of Badge Council and what have you. At the time of the previous report, you'd had 23 respondents. Have you had any increase on that level of response, or is that still a reasonable reflection of the results of the community engagement?
In terms of the online consultation event, well, that was open for a couple of weeks, or at least 2 weeks, and then the consultation ended. So there hasn't been a website where people can add any additional comments. But I thought the responses and the range of responses was quite good. I felt like it was an effective mechanism.
Okay.
Sorry?
23 responses out of 540 letters.
But it sounds, maybe one way to look at it is that that people didn't seem to mind the location of the solar farm. You know, you mostly hear from people who are really against a proposal. It's the people who don't mind or are really in favour of it who often do not speak.
Okay, thank you. In the current report, there's a reference to a proposed community fund, and at the second report, I think the parish council have not been able to respond to you. Have you had any response yet from the parish council?
I have not. No, I haven't tried contacting them again since submitting the plan application. But obviously, should things go well, then obviously we will try again. Yes.
Thank you. And my final question is as regards the Greenbelt, because I'm sure you'll be aware the authority as a whole, and particularly this board, takes protection of our Greenbelt very seriously. In your own words, I've read what the officers have told us in here, but in your words, what are the very special circumstances in support of this application to warrant development in the Greenbelt?
So the fight against climate change, the extensive hedgerow planting, so the fight against ecological decline, the fact that the site has been chosen because it is in a bit of a bowl, so views are somewhat limited into the site. The design of the site has been has taken careful consideration of soil quality, and has been designed to avoid as much as possible best and most versatile agricultural land, and it would also provide continued employment through renewable energy and the various supply chains. Those are the ones that come to mind just now, but obviously I think there were more listed in the report itself.
I suspect I know your answer, but can I just press a little bit further in this fight against climate change? Do you think that the loss of Greenbelt countermines your fight against climate change?
Well, the NPPF says that some renewable energy projects could be accommodated in the Greenbelt, and I think this is what's happened here. It's in our mind a suitable site, and I think the benefits definitely outweigh any harm, any limited harm that may be caused on the Greenbelt. And it's also temporary as well, so it will revert back. And once the solar farm is removed, there will be amazing hedgerows and amazing trees for generations to come.
Thank you very much. I mean, I don't intend to be sarcastic here, but at almost 60 years old, this is permanent for my lifetime.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yes.
Members, any other questions for our speaker? Oh, thank you very much indeed, Mr.
Thank you.
Members, who'd like to open the debate? Councillor Riley.
Chair, I was struck really about the site on the site visit, both about its setting as a continuous area that started on the far right on the hill and flowed through, and being a valley, there were some very nice aesthetics about the area. I'm concerned about the issue of impact on amenity in the area and about noise, as well as the obvious visual. And I think the considerations that you raise about the Greenbelt are spot on. Has a case to demonstrate that significant harm is being mitigated, being made. It doesn't really feel as though it has. I think this is a straightforward application to build a significant structure which will dominate the Greenbelt and the area for, as you say, for over 50 years. And I feel at the moment I don't actually have enough information to determine.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think I'll agree with Councillor Riley there. There's an awful lot of information that we've just not got. The person who wrote in had got some suggestions which need to take more consideration, I think, and we really need to look at them. Councillor Riley's earlier point about noise, I'd like a little bit more information about that, and on the impact on wildlife and ecology generally. I think we need something on that, and of course we need a response back from the parish council as well. So I'd like to propose, Chairman, that we defer this application until we've got further information.
Thank you. Councillor Davies?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'm glad that Councillor Bell said that, because I've still got concerns about our wildlife. You know, I know he said that as his comment said at the end, that when they take it away, we're going to have lovely trees and lovely edges, but I'm concerned that we're going to have no wildlife to use these trees and edges. So at this time, I'm still not comfortable. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
I think we spent some time on the site visit looking from the side where it is least visible. And I think that to do this properly, we really need to look at it from the other direction as well. This is an open aspect in the valley. We've got footpaths going through it. And I know that's difficult to go and look at on a site visit, but I think we really need to do that. That there are positions on the opposite side of that valley that face it that you will be able to have access to, and I don't think we've seen that. And the comments about the biodiversity, etc., I think are very important, and I don't think we've seen enough on this yet to be confident in supporting.
Yeah, I'm generally in favour of solar farms. I think that they can add things to our areas, but they do have to be done and they properly, and they have to be done right. And I don't think the answer to the questions regarding it is supposed to improve biodiversity. Net biodiversity is supposed to go up, but I think that there are still, but again, only if it's done right and sympathetically with the area. And I think kind of responses like hawthorn, and it should be a range, and it should be a planned mix of forestry to support more wildlife than just one tree. And I think a strategic approach to it to make sure that we actually understand the wildlife which is in situ at the moment, so that we can actually sympathetically plan for it, would be really welcome to inform the decision on this.
Can I just add to that, that one of the things that I read in this report was that this is going to improve soil quality, and I don't understand how that works. I'd like to understand a little bit more when I support planning applications, when it makes claims like that.
I think the comment was that it would be left alone, essentially lie fallow for 40 years, and that on its own would improve it, but fair point. Councillor Hayfield?
You're doing hedgerow planting of things, they're not just hawthorn or blackthorns, what are the other traditional plantings. Now, if you're going to do ecological diversity and stuff, then there ought to be a number of different species planted in there. My question, in terms of, if we're deferring it, we've had a lot of applications for solar farms, each saying, well, we need more solar energy. This is going to provide this. The energy is going to provide this. What I've lost track of is just how much capacity in terms of solar energy we are looking to generate at the moment with the existing applications that we've approved. Because if you're going to sacrifice the green belt to do this, then it isn't just because solar energy is a good thing. It should be because we need this capacity of solar energy in this area at this time. You know, that maybe that's already been answered somewhere, but I wouldn't mind that being rehearsed again, just to convince me that it is worth the sacrifice of the green belt.
Members, any other comments? Councillor Humphries?
There's something I would be interested in is it's going to feed 5,000 homes or over 5,000 homes, but it's going to save 3,000 tonnes of carbon. I'd like to know the carbon cost to get to the point where you're going to save 3,000 carbon. You know, we're going to find 50,000 tonnes of carbon getting the panels of glass production, the most inefficient and the most carbon use possible. And are they locally made, or are they going to come halfway across the world? Bunker fuel, the worst type of fuel you could use. I'd just like to know sometime what the carbon cost is to actually get to the point before we save anything, and then you could net that off what because they all claim carbon saving. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, as you're aware, I ordinarily refrain from commenting on individual applications because I don't want to be seen to be leading something. But I'd say you've all identified a lot of my concerns with this application. I genuinely accept that the provision of solar power can be a very special circumstance for development of the Greenbelt. But I am concerned at the number of applications we have had in the Greenbelt for solar power facilities, and not just already granted, but the ones that we know are going to arrive. So to an extent, I'll be asking the same questions to subsequent applicants in terms of, I think, Councillor Hayfield, you raised it, where is the country at in terms of the provision of alternative energy? And at what point will we have had enough? How critical is this individual site to the national need? We're being asked regularly to give up bits of Greenbelt for development, which by definition creates harm. This will create harm in our Greenbelt. Our office has started out the conversation by saying this is an inappropriate use of Greenbelt land. The very special circumstance can get over that, but I don't think I've had a clear answer yet as to how important this is and how special that circumstance is to get us to the situation where we're going to give up a significant amount of Greenbelt to get there for, I'm not commenting on your own lifestyles, members, but for the majority of us, for the rest of our lives. I'd like to understand more the implication on wildlife, particularly as far as migratory birds are concerned. You know, the application that's coming next makes the point very much that the impact on migratory birds on a cumulative basis is there. So I think there's an awful lot more information we need before I would certainly, personally, would be happy to make a decision on this application. I'm very happy to go along with a proposal to defer for more information. Because genuine members, I think there's a lot of holes here that need to be filled in before it gets to a position where we can make a decision for or against it. So I think, Councillor Wiley, you proposed deferment.
Yes, please, Chair.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Clues. Mr. Brown, do you have a detailed list of questions that we'd like the applicant to give us? I think it's the answers to the response that we've had from the neighbour, the issues over very special circumstance, ecology and wildlife.
In this case, Mr. Chairman, I have made a detailed note.
Excellent. I think as well, just to make the point, the proposed community fund, frankly, I would much rather we'd be in a situation to know the outcome of that before we determine the application as well. So members, are you all happy with deferment on that basis?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. That item is deferred, and we will aim to get it back to the next meeting, subject to having answers on all those points. The next application, members, is a consultation from Tamworth Borough Council, consultation number 5 for land to the east of Amington Hall Farm. Mr. Brown, anything to add to your comment?
No, Mr. Chairman, just to say this is an application which has gone to Tamworth, and therefore we're a consultee. Just the slides, you can see here the large area here. It's larger than the last one we're looking at. Shussington is here, Alfcott's here, and the Alfcott pools you can see are the blue areas here. Again, there's footpaths through the site. A little more detail again showing the layout, but it's larger than the last one. In particular, in this one, I think that we ought to be informing Tamworth about the ecological and biodiversity concerns, particularly with the presence of the SSSIs immediately to the south. And before Tamworth do decide, they ought to satisfy themselves that there's going to be no adverse impacts for the 2 or 3 points as I've mentioned in the recommendation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Just a couple of comments before we open the debate. Number one, I think an awful lot of what we said on the last application is of relevance here. And where it is of relevance, can you please incorporate it? Number two, on previous occasions when we've had material applications on our border with Tamworth, we've invited them to come to our meetings and engage with us about things that might have been relevant to them. This is just about on our boundary with us. It's very material, particularly for some of those isolated rural villages. It would have been nice if Tamworth had returned the favour, I think. Members, any comment?
You've
Councillor Parsons.
beaten me to what I was going to say.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, to a certain extent, we come to the dilemma between green belt and green spaces. This is an important area of green space. It's going to be a very, very exposed site as it goes up the hill towards the village of Shuddington. It is an area very much occupied as a nature reserve and a site of special scientific interest. I mean, it deserves very considerable scrutiny, in my view, in this area. I mean, I don't know whether I would suggest a joint visit with Tamworth to actually look at this together. I've got very grave concerns about this site, and the sort of the bird life there. It's a very almost national significance there. It's important, and this needs very, very careful consideration, in my view.
Completely. Councillor Davies? Or would you?
You've both beaten me to my comments. I would like to echo them.
Thank you. Councillor Clues?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's recommendation 1, the interference of flight patterns of birds using the Advocate Falls SSI and associated land. Well, the associated land really is also just over the border, and it's the same as any family. When the children grow up, they've got to move out somewhere.
Councillor Mrs. Humphries?
Thank you, Chair. One of the things we've just been talking about is noise. Do we know where anything's going to be situated on this plan as to where the noise is and where the wind flow is? Because again, that is very windy around that area and the noise travels, as we know. So have we had any consultation on, discussions on where that area is for this plan?
Mr. Brown?
Mr. Chairman, this is an application that's gone to Tamworth, so therefore Tamworth Environmental Health Officers will look into that. There's no reason, Mr. Chairman, in the recommendation, whatever the view is, that you add those concerns that have been raised around the table. At the moment, the recommendation is that this has significant concerns. It sounds as if members may want to formally object. That's entirely up to you, Mr. Chairman, and the board.
Councillor Bell?
Thank you. Yes, I'd certainly want to formally object. I'm really concerned, obviously, we're going to respond to this as a consultee, but the impact of this is likely to be on those ecological sites in our border, within our border. And I am really concerned about what can we do if we think Tamworth have not taken sufficient consideration of what we have in our area, if you like, when considering this application. I just want to know what powers we've got, really, because this is seriously significant.
And I think aside from consulting with the relevant authority, our powers are zip.
There's not any appeal system using, MPs and stuff, because this is significant.
No, not that I'm aware of.
No, Mr. Chairman, the only option you might have is if this is granted in face of an objection from us is a judicial review. But as long as the Tamworth Borough Council can show they've actively and fortunately considered our objection, that would be quite a, I don't expect, Mr. Tobin is the best person who advise on that, but I don't expect that to be followed through.
No, so it was in the absence of a clearly irrational consideration of any objection we raised, then it's unlikely the High Court will interfere, and it may then send it back for further consideration. But obviously, I'm not saying that means we shouldn't, as an authority, consider objective grounds to do so. But the redress, if it's not successful, is very limited.
What is the timeframe that Tam's working to on this?
This came in quite recently, Mr. Chairman. So depending on what the board's view is tonight, I'll be writing to them tomorrow. It was certainly before Easter, and request as a result, if it is an objection and the matters that are raised, that we have meetings almost immediately, as soon as it can be arranged before the end of the month anyway. Given the time periods that we have with our own applications for solar farms, we just had the last one, that's been in 3 or 4 months. So I won't see Tamworth actually making a determination on this probably until the early summer.
Thank you. Councillor Wyler.
It's a question again from Mr. Brown, please, Chair. I mean, obviously we consider oppressiveness and over-intensification on some applications. The maps on page 88 and the top map, which puts the site into the context of the built development in Tamworth, really does illustrate how huge this development is. And actually, as I look at it, it feels oppressive on the area, never mind anything else. Would that be a planning concern? I know it's not mentioned in your report, but would the intensification of the site alone be a consideration?
I think it's a fair point, Councillor Marley, and I take your point in respect of the size of the application compared to the size of Tamworth. I'd say actually it's the size of Seckington, the size of Newton Regis, and all of the villages around there compared to the size of this application. The land take here dwarfs the local villages. Yeah, Mr. Brown.
I don't think you'd go on size alone, Mr. Chairman. What you would have to do is to show there was an adverse visual impact and landscape impact. The size would certainly strengthen your view on that, because just a couple of fields would not have the same impact.
Yeah.
So the size of it does have as a consequence, but you should be reporting to Tamworth on the impacts of that size, not necessarily the size itself.
It's bigger than Dordon. When you look at Dordon line on the map,
It's massive.
Yeah.
Councillor Davies.
I think I heard Councillor Bell propose that we objective.
Yes.
And I would like to second that.
Severe, or whatever the word was.
Put together a set of reasons that we are objecting.
I'll take Mr. Brown's guidance on it. My instinct is a holding objection, because if you like, there's a lot of questions, I think, and rather than have a formal, this is it. My view is that even with the answer to those questions, we will still be objecting, but we'll have a stronger basis for the objection based on the information. If, Mr. Brown, you feel that they might move sooner than the timescale you alluded to, then a formal objection. But at this point, I'm sort of more inclined to a holding objection to actually say to them, look, Tamworth, please come and let us talk to you and let us have a more material engagement with this.
I suggest, Mr. Chairman, if you are suggesting a holding objection, we see what happens, basically, is what you're saying, isn't it? It's your holding objection, if that's what the board agrees. See what happens, and then we can always come back and take that further.
But I would make the point to Tamworth that, look, if you're going to determine this soon, then it's a formal full objection.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back briefly, I mean, this is not a nondescript area. It's not a sort of disappearing into a valley thing. It's going uphill to an attractive village, coming from a nature reserve. it really, it deserves a walk around to look at what's being done here. It really isn't, in my view, a good exercise at all.
Councillor Hayfield.
We don't know, do we, what their councillors think about this yet, do we?
No.
Because they may well, if they're anywhere near as good as us, have a similar range of concerns. And a holding objection, and you and whoever going off to see them and talking through your concerns with them, you might find there's some commonality of the results. Because I mean, we're just assuming they just want to plough ahead with this. Well, they may not.
Fair point. So, members, are you happy with that response?
Yeah.
Holding objection unless it's short term, in which case it's a full objection, but a desire to engage with Tamworth to see what level of common ground there is.
Yeah.
All those in favour of that? Thank you very much. We move on to our final planning application for this evening, number 238 for the Pulse Working Men's Club. Karen Stevens has come back to talk to you all again, so if you wouldn't mind taking the speaker's chair while Mr. Brown introduces his further report. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The plans are shown on the screen, but members should be familiar with the proposal at the present time. Following the last referral, the applicant was asked to look at traffic implications and also to see whether any further improvements could be made in enhancing the heritage assets in the area. You can see those responses in the appendices. They're attached to the report, but I've got nothing further to add to the main report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Stevens, welcome back to the Council House. You're becoming a regular visitor, but you're very welcome. As you might remember, Mr. Tobin will now explain the rules on public engagement. Mr. Tobin.
Good evening. So you've been here before and seen it with the other applicants tonight. I'll just go through it again. In a moment, you were given 3 minutes in which to address the board. So I'll let you know when your 3 minutes begins. I'll let you know when you have 1 minute remaining, and then I'll let you know when your 3 minutes end. So your time starts.
Good evening, Chairman and committee members. My name is Karen Stevens, Director of Westbourne Leisure. I'm here to represent the case for the renovation of the Poulsworth Social Club, including the change of use of the function room to install a mezzanine floor to provide a bed and breakfast accommodation. You will recall the last time this was presented to the committee, the application was deferred, subject to clarification of the existing and proposed traffic movements. There also was a desire to see further enhancements to the conservation area above those that had already been submitted. We have therefore submitted, based on another venue of a similar size, an approximation of the anticipated vehicle activity together with an indication of the current use. Also, we have provided a revised layout plan indicating the complete resurfacing of the car park marked out to provide 37 spaces. Additional landscaping to the front of the site and low-level lighting positions. We will also implement a car park management plan which includes supervision at weekends and monitoring during the week with additional signage. We would hope that this will further enhance the development and that you would please recommend and accept the recommendation of your planning officer and grant the approval.
Thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? Yeah, just one from me, if I may. So last time round we talked and asked you to come back to us in terms of car parking. I can see that. And then we were asking about the heritage issue. If I've understood properly, your answer in respect of heritage is you're going to resurface the car park and add some more landscaping. Is there anything else on there that you're proposing to do?
We have been asked to keep the building looking in the similar retro style that it is. That has been intimated to us from the heritage. So what we're going to try and do is enhance it with the landscaping. Obviously, there's the lift outside for the disabled, and all that will be done in resurfacing. But we're going to make it as pretty as we possibly can. But what we're not going to do is make it look like a modern building, because we've been asked not to. And obviously, we want this to be in keeping. So we've tried our best, hopefully, that we've managed to incorporate everything that's been asked of us.
Thanks very much. Members, any other questions? I'm not sure I saw first. Councillor, Mrs. Clues?
Is there going to be any community use loss that's being used at the club now? Like, I don't know if you have bingo sessions or team chat sessions or anything.
We have all those.
And that's not going to be lost. And it will, I don't know if you charge it, will it still be free?
Yeah, I mean, we've tried very hard to work within the community. You know, we do bingo, we do the dancing, we do lots of different things. And I think one of the big confusion is that the function room wasn't going to be quite as big as the function room is now. But in the new function room, we haven't got all the stage area and the courtroom area. So actually the footage, it isn't that different. So, you know, we will be able to incorporate everything we do. And maybe, hopefully, because the building will look as good as it will.
Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Humphries?
Thank you. When we spoke before, you said about the rooms and the days that they could actually stay with you. How are you going to manage that if people just don't go or want to stay longer? How are you going to, you know, police it, if you like? How is that going to happen?
Well, as I explained, I think when you came onto the visit, most of our bookings come through booking.com. And people book online and they book for a stay. We've never incurred anybody come to their end of the stay and not want to go. We don't do long-term lets. It is a stay. So if somebody like yourself books a hotel for 2 days, you would go for 2 days. I don't know how else I can explain I mean, I've been through the booking system at length with lots of different people, but you know, we really are a bed and breakfast. You know, you come in, you book for that length of time and then you go. You know, we don't do cash bookings as I've explained before. You know, we take ID, so you've got to have a proof of address. We just like any other bed and breakfast. And, you know, as I explained at the time to you, I think, you know, we've got a few of these and these things just, they don't happen. We never have somebody that refuses to check out. You know, they book for their stay and it's time for them to go.
So you're just taking from the general public, you're not taking from any other sort of councils or refugees or anything like that, you're just taking from the general public?
Yes, most definitely. Okay. We discussed that at the last meeting.
Any other questions, Ben? Councillor Ryan.
Thank you. 2 questions. First one is about kitchen. I think in previous periods here, you said that the kitchen was. Well, I can't remember. You said the kitchen was going to go, or whether it was going to stay.
The kitchen is staying, but it's not staying.
The dining room is going.
No, not at all. So, have you visited the site? Right. So on your plans, you'll see the bar area as it is at the moment, as it's planned to be. So it's going behind where the original bar is at the minute, and it's quite a big kitchen because obviously it's meant to. Well, it will do bed, breakfast, evenings, and it will also be open to the general public. Breakfast, lunch, and evening. But on the visit, I actually showed people where it sits and the size of it.
Okay, thank you. And then the second one is you said, when you were just speaking, you said something about the appearance of the building. I didn't quite catch that. What you were saying. You say the heritage officer was actually preserved.
No, we had some discussions with, can I ask Dave the name of the lady? Was it Margaret?
Margaret Henry.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we had discussions with Margaret Henry, and she said that it was important for us, in her opinion, to be able to not lose the retro look of the building.
Right, straight.
So we discussed this at a meeting, and you know, we agreed. You know, we don't want to lose that look, but obviously everything about that place needs enhancing. So it will be enhanced, but we won't lose the look.
So it was a member of the community as opposed to an officer.
Yes.
If you'd like, I could just explain. Margaret is a well-known local figure who is very well known in Heritage Circle. And
Chair of the Warwickshire Heritage Forum.
Yeah.
yes. So she has a lot to do with our current conservation officer, and is well respected in this area, and expresses herself fully when she does. Is the best I can do.
And to be fair, she attended the meetings that I did with the general public, and she was really, really good, and she put quite a lot of input into how her own fears had been dismayed from the initial application. So it really was helpful having her on board.
Any other questions, Ben? Councillor Wilson?
There's, you say 37 car park spaces.
That's correct.
And 25 rooms. So if everybody in those rooms brings one car, there's only 12 car parking spaces for the normal everyday club. How many? What's the requirement at the moment for the normal functioning of the club?
Depends on, at the moment, the general public, as it's stated in the report, just park willy-nilly on the car park. So it's not.
Is that within 12, or will that be exceeding the cost of the car park?
Well, they won't be doing that going forward. So patrons will be using that car park. So the management plan will ensure that it's used for what it's there for.
But even so, you've got 25 dedicated to the bedrooms to the hotel.
Yes, that's more than enough.
That only leaves the 12 for the
Most
normal
people-
everyday, you know, for your dancing classes or your bingo or whatever else.
But where it
And
is
staff and all of those things.
Sorry.
That's quite a,
I
it's okay.
didn't mean to
That
input.
seems like
Yeah.
quite a small number.
Well, it's in the village, so most people walk there that are using it. You know, the car park issue hasn't been people using the premise.
Can I just come back on what Councillor was just saying? If you've got the car park full of people staying and then you put on a function, and can you correct me, how many do you take in the function room?
The function can hold up to, I think it's 180 people.
So, and you're looking at putting on weddings or something like, they're not going to be walking. They're going to
No,
want to come in
but
cars and park, aren't
Most
they?
of the people that will book a function of that size, like our function room now. So if we just looked at it as it is, because it's the same sort of size, our functions at the moment are between 50 and 70 people.
Mm.
No more. And at the moment, those people, they do drive because there's nowhere to stay. So the idea of this is you're not going to get people from, I don't know, say from Wales come all the way to Polesworth to book the function room there. The idea is, obviously, it's there for the community. So the function room, 9 times out of 10, is booked by people that live in the village. So the idea is that those people would be staying in the rooms. And if you look at the capacity of how our rooms work, we are busier Monday to Friday than ever we are on a Saturday and Sunday. Because if you've got local contractors staying, they go home at the weekends. So therefore, it really is the way that the management plan will work. So whereas we've got 37 spaces, we haven't even got 37 spaces at the moment because they're not marked out. But our car park will be used by people that aren't using the club at the moment. If the people were using the club and at the function, there would still be enough space from the people that are walking into the functions.
In an ideal world?
No, in a proven world at Polesworth. I mean, like, we've had that club for a long, long time.
But you haven't, if I can just interrupt, you haven't had it at the capacity you want to open it up as. You haven't had it as a large function room at this particular time. So you can't actually say it is definitely going to work.
Well,
because you haven't had it working like that yet.
Well, we have, because years gone by, that function room was busy. We've had this club for 12 years.
But you haven't had it as a hotel, and you haven't had it as a large function
hotel.
room.
But what we have done is we have taken, as we were asked to, our figures from another venue in a similar location to do this. And we have done that. And that's what we were asked to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, members, we'll move into the discussion on the application now. Just before we do, if you don't mind, Ms. Brown, I have a question for you. In your report, you quite rightly point out that in assessing the merits of a development proposal, the council is under a statutory duty to pay special attention to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character and appearance of the area. Has our conservation officer expressed any comments to us or to you about the desirability of enhancing the character and appearance of the area?
First of all, Mr. Chairman, the Heritage Officers indicated that this would not be a candidate for listing. The point is made that obviously it's an iconic building, it's been described, but the Conservation Officer would not put this forward as a heritage asset in the sense that it would be listed. And secondly, her view is that the building does need an improvement. She may actually take, if given a clean sheet of paper, she may come up with a different design or appearance. But at the moment, she feels that there could be some further enhancements to the actual building itself.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I'm just focusing on the statutory responsibility of the authority to consider the desirability of preserving, which I think we dealt with, or enhancing the character of the area. Members, any questions or comments, speeches, proposals? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I really appreciate that this proposal is trying to find a new use for a building that is under threat in terms of liability. And I appreciate all the work that's been done to try and satisfy us that that would be a good idea. However, I cannot get over the heritage issue. For me, this is really important. And this application is in the Polesworth Conservation Area. And whilst this building itself may not be to be preserved, although I would like a little bit more reassurance about how it's to be changed, it's right next to buildings that very much are our heritage and that we want to preserve. And I haven't been reassured at all that that this development is going to enhance that area. And as you quoted, that's our responsibility, that these developments should enhance the heritage, not take away from it. So I'm going to propose refusal to this application because I really am concerned about its location, not about its use particularly, but about its location. And I would quote, if I have to, reasons for refusal. They don't accord with policy, I think it's LP 15 of our local plan 2021, and are supplemented by section 16 of the National Planning Policy Framework.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Is there a seconder for that proposal? Two of them, so thank you. Are there any other proposals to consider? Anyone else?
More a statement, really. I mean, this building is a 1960s building. It's been there for a long time. On the one hand, if you look at the frontage, you have an attractive frontage to the Spread Eagle Road. On the side, you have a chip shop, which is absolutely attractive. It's been there in that position. It's been a place that people have enjoyed, not so much in recent years. It's not been at its best, and there is a scheme here, perhaps, to put new life into it. In a sense, it seems that it's almost being sort of held responsible for the decline of the area, which doesn't seem to be terribly fair to me. It's not responsible for the decline of the area. It's there. There are a dedicated number of people who enjoy going there. It's their club. They've been going there all their lives in many cases and want to continue to go to it. That's there. We're looking at it in the round. There are the employment aspects to this. It would bring employment. That's there. Yes, there are the traffic issues, but it hasn't caused huge traffic problems in any sense at all. And the projected use, to be honest, the car park, if it's relayed, will go a long way to coping with the problem there. There's no question there. It's a question of looking at this and thinking, okay, it's an attempt to bring new life into something that's been there for quite a long time in Boswell. And what happens if this scheme doesn't go ahead? And that's the thing that we also have to think about, because there is an attempt here to bring some life back. Where it goes, if that doesn't occur, is a bit of a problem. Is all I'm saying.
That's anything.
I've got very mixed feelings on this, Chair. I can understand the heritage concerns, absolutely I can. But I'm also agreeing very much with what Dave Parsons says as well. We've seen so many of these clubs and things disappear from North Warwickshire over the last few years. They're not really viable in their old traditional form, which is why they've all gone. This is an attempt to try and find a broader use for the buildings at the same time as refitting them. And in many ways, I think that's to be commended. I really am sort of sitting on the fence here, Chair, as to whether I would support this or support refusal.
Okay, Councillor.
In a similar way, there's some of our heritage buildings which have not been allowed to progress, have not found a use, have fallen into disrepair and actually been lost completely. So one of the building where the roof collapsed recently, over there somewhere, where the roof collapsed recently, was something that we tried to save and tried to preserve and tried to bring back into a good repair, but actually we ended up stalling so long, or the developers ended up stalling so long, that we've lost all hope of being able to save it, and I wouldn't like to be in that position. I commented last time on the kind of the actual asset that is the club at the moment and the social aspects to it, which is really important. So again, I'm quite divided in the fact that I love the attempts to preserve the building, to improve the building and to enhance it and to provide a better service and to make it sustainable for the community use. But there's obviously concerns with the siting and the car parks and the wider impact.
I'm just, I'm not trying to influence you one way or the other. I'll just remind everyone, guidance from the Heritage Officer is that this building is not of sufficient quality that she would recommend it for listing as a heritage building, but it is within the conservation area.
Chair, make an additional observation. The proposal in the original report does recommend two conditions of relevance to that point, which is one, that the development shall not commence until details of replacement materials have been submitted and approved, and similarly the window, so there is control envisaged from those recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Chair. I think just expand a little bit on what Councillor Gosling said. we're looking at sort of development or dereliction in the worst situation, and looking at the proposal, would it be more feasible to put conditions on this? To if it's approved, to put conditions within the approval to control what's required. I'm looking at Mr. Brown. Is that something that could be conditioned to satisfy the concerns?
Well, Mr. Tolan's already mentioned the conditions which are on the original original recommendation, which assumption obviously we're saying should be taken forward. So materials and appearance are covered in that way. The recommendation, the conditions in fact have been added to as we've gone through this process. First of all, to set out a car parking management plan, which has been referred to by the speaker. Secondly, to sort out a booking management plan. So therefore, we can also add a construction management plan. And also the condition relating to the plans will be updated to show the updated plans in terms of the car parking, surfacing, lighting, and the additional planting at the front. So they will all be covered, Mr. Chairman, in an approval if that's where the board goes.
Thank you, Sir Jack.
Councillor Parsons?
Yeah, the one thing I will point out, I mean, you have pointed out quite correctly, Chair, that this building is not going to be subject to listing. But it's certainly not the only building in this area that isn't going to be subject to listing. You know, there are quite a number of buildings there that don't warrant listing, and there are some that very definitely do. Nunnery Gateway, which is opposite the club, is a notable example of a building that does warrant listing and is listed and has been preserved to a very high standard. But it is a living, breathing community. There is a facility there which is not at its best. If it is not actually improved, then there will be loss of facility for the community, and that's something to consider.
Yeah, I was going to say that clearly this building isn't worth listing from what we've been told, and I think that is a fairly accurate description of it. We are in the situation that this is there, an in-poor condition. Now, it does provide some local amenity, and is valued by some people in the community. It's not a building that I find particularly attractive. But if we were to cast our mind back to when Coventry Cathedral was proposed, it's just down the road from Coventry Priory, it's next to the conservation area there, and it was completely off the wall at the time, but it got through. Now, every area has different characters mixed in with it and around it. And just because this is 60s building that doesn't seem particularly attractive, is that the only value that we should be considering here, whether it can be listed? Should we be looking at the amenity value and the comments from the local consultation that has taken place? And I'm not sure. I'm sort of here with it, but I'm worried about what will happen in this site, and will it become much worse, right, in the conservation area if we don't allow something to be done with it, than if we actually have a positive plan to try and improve this site.
Members, I would remind you that maintenance of the building is the owner's responsibility. They don't need planning consent to maintain the building. Don't let's get confused here between the application we have, which is for a different use, and whether this building is going to look any better at the end of the day. Mr. Brown, the planning condition number 5 talks about details of the facing materials, as Mr. Tobin suggested, and number 6 talks about the 11 windows on the east elevation. Am I to take it from planning, from condition number 5, there's a suggestion that the building will be refaced? Because I didn't hear that from the applicant.
No, it's just to agree the new facing materials, the render colour and details of that nature. That's all it will be. It's not a new building.
I took it from what Mr. Tobin was saying, that there will be some enhancement.
Well, yes. To agree the materials, we can ensure the materials are in keeping with the conservation area and appropriate to that particular building. And secondly, with the windows as well, the design of the fenestration.
I'm confused, Mr. Brown. Are we putting new facing materials on, or not? You know, I don't know. I'm trying to understand the extent of condition 5, particularly given what you told us in your report, that the board has to have particular concern regarding preserving and enhancing the conservation area.
It's more to do with the colour of the render, Mr. Chairman, that's being proposed for the building, and I believe there's some tile hanging as well, which will have to be looked at.
Okay, so facing materials.
Facing materials, yes.
Okay. Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, listening to colleagues speak, there is a proposal here that we've got a gun to our head, as I interpret the comments that have been made. We either accept this or we have something worse. Actually, the issue here, as Councillor Bell quite rightly said, was the requirements within the local plan and the consideration of the impact in terms of this change of use on what is probably the premier heritage asset in North Warwickshire in terms of the Abbey. We've listened to the concerns, and the concerns are quite right about car parking and the impact of car parking on that area. And I don't really think that anybody has made out a case here to say that any of the concerns around the damage to the heritage of the location and the value of the location have been dissuaded. I hear Margaret Henley's quoted by the Speaker and also by the councillors, and what's been said does not accord to my understanding of Margaret Henley's views. So I feel as though I need to know more from our heritage officer about this setting and about this area of use if we are going to determine the application tonight. I mean, this is a one-off opportunity to make improvements to a really valuable heritage asset, and whether it be through approving or whether it be through refusing remains unclear at the moment. But I suppose I'm concerned about the suggestion that we only have one opportunity and we better take the one opportunity while we have it. So I don't agree with that.
Thank you. Councillors, it's genuinely, as or ever, up to you which way you vote. As I see it, there is a deal of, I don't mean indecision, I mean a deal of members not feeling as though they have all the information that they would wish to have to be able to make a determination. But I haven't heard an awful lot about what additional information it is you would like to have. This application was received in 2021. One of the oldest applications we've had before us. In fairness to the applicant, I would encourage you to make a decision. We've had one proposal for refusal. I haven't yet seen a proposal for consent to be granted as recommended by our officers, or indeed for a further deferral to obtain additional information to enable you to make a decision. And nor have I heard any issues about what that would be that you would wish to have. But the applicant has a reasonable right, I would say, to have a decision, yes or no, given that the application came to us in 2021. I think they've waited long enough. So, members, if I could encourage you, please, to come to a conclusion. At the moment, we have a recommendation, a proposal that consent be refused. Are there any other proposals? I'm not trying to hold your feet to the fire, but get on with it. Okay. Councillor Parsons.
It's a very difficult one, and yeah, I think it deserves an airing, so I'm going to propose that we accept the application as the recommendation.
The recommendation, if you like, the collective series of recommendations. Is there a second? And I'm sorry that
I will, so we get a balanced.
Okay, Mr. Tobin, I'm inclined to take the refusal first, because if we refuse, then we don't need to go into consideration of that. There's only guidance from you as to which Councillor Bell got in first, if you will.
Yeah, ordinarily you take them in the order that they are made. So, yes, that's the first one received, so.
Okay. So members will vote first on Councillor Bell's recommendation for refusal. If that is the majority view, I will not put the alternative to a vote because we've already made a decision. It's essentially one or the other, so it's 2 sides of the coin. So Councillor Bell recommended refusal of the planning application for the reasons she stated. Can I see those in favour of refusal? Eight. Those against? Nobody against? Abstention? So 8 in favour of refusal, none against, and a number of abstentions, 5 abstentions. On that basis, the planning application. I'm sure that's not what the applicant would have wished to occur, but it's rather better in a way than a further period of not making a decision. Members, we now move to agenda item number 10, which is exclusion of the public inquest for the items of business printed on page 10/1. I would like to move that in accordance with section 184 of the Local Government Act, that we now move into private session. All those in favour? And those against? Thank you, that's unanimous.